A city says its new law will protect affordable housing. The law passes, housing prices don't meaningfully change. But hotel prices do. That's the Airbnb ban story in one sentence.
You're saying the stated goal of the policy and what actually shifted when the policy took effect aren't the same thing.
And the gap between them adds up to billions.
This is the Cause and Effect Show. In September 2023, New York City did something no other major American city had done. It effectively banned Airbnb. Hosts had to register with the city, and almost none were approved. Overnight, 2/3 of short-term rental listings vanished.
I remember that. The city framed it as protecting housing and keeping neighborhoods livable. Was there more to it?
That's what my co-authors and I set out to answer. We looked at who actually pushed for the ban, who benefited from it, and whether the public interest story holds up when you follow the money.
So you're asking whether this was really about helping renters, or about something else?
Exactly. And to understand the answer, you need to see the size mismatch. Before the ban, there were about 22,000 Airbnb listings in New York City, but 5 firms control the overwhelming majority of hotels in New York City.
So far more individual Airbnb hosts than hotels.
And that matters enormously for politics. Think about it like this. If you and a dozen neighbors want a stop sign on your street, you can coordinate pretty easily. But getting 22,000 people scattered across an entire city to organize, fundraise, and show up at hearings? That's a much harder problem.
So the hotels had a built-in political advantage just because there were fewer of them.
That's a core prediction of what economists call regulatory capture theory. Compact, organized industries are better at lobbying than large, dispersed groups. And the data is striking. Since 2008, the hotel industry contributed almost $600,000 to New York City politicians. The Airbnb network contributed just over $18,000,
roughly a 30-to-1 spending gap.
And the Hotel Association of New York explicitly lists the passage of this law as one of its advocacy accomplishments. They testified at hearings, shaped the rulemaking, and worked directly with the city council.
So the hotel industry clearly wanted this regulation, but wanting it and benefiting from it are two different things. What actually happened after the ban?
We used a method called synthetic difference in differences. In plain terms, we built a statistical twin of New York City, a weighted combination of other major hotel markets like Boston, Chicago, and Miami that mimicked New York's hotel trends before the ban. Then we compared what actually happened after the ban to what the twin predicted would have happened without it.
So the twin is like a control group. It shows what New York City hotel prices would have looked like if Airbnb had never been banned.
Exactly. And the gap between the twin and reality is the ban's effect. We found that average daily hotel room prices increased by about $36 after the ban. The pre-ban average was around $250 a night, so that's a 14.4% jump.
That's a lot. But couldn't that just be inflation or tourism bouncing back after COVID?
That's precisely what the statistical twin controls for. Those broader trends affected all the comparison cities too. The $36 is the additional increase specific to New York, above and beyond what was happening everywhere else.
So hotels are charging more. Are they also filling more rooms?
No, and that's one of the most telling results. We found no significant change in occupancy. Hotels weren't filling more rooms after the ban. They were just charging more for the same number of rooms.
So it's not that the ban drove more tourists into hotels. With Airbnb mostly gone, hotels just had less competition.
Think about it like a neighborhood with 10 restaurants. If 5 close overnight but the same number of people still want to eat out, the remaining 5 can raise prices because diners have fewer options. That's essentially what happened with lodging in New York.
And if prices are up but occupancy is flat, that means a revenue windfall.
A big one. We estimate hotel revenue increased by about $206.7 million per month after the ban. Over a year, that's roughly $2.5 billion in additional revenue, a 20% increase. And because occupancy didn't change, almost all of it came from higher prices, not more rooms sold.
So $2.5 billion a year shifted from travelers who now pay more to hotel owners who lobbied for the ban.
That's what the evidence shows. Now, we're careful in the paper to note that legitimate concerns about Airbnb do exist. Short-term rentals can reduce long-term housing supply, create noise for neighbors, and sidestep safety regulations.
So the housing advocates and the hotels ended up wanting the same policy, but for completely different reasons.
Economists call this the bootleggers and Baptists dynamic, when a group with genuine moral concerns and a group with financial self-interest push for the same regulation. The moral argument gives the policy legitimacy, while the industry provides the lobbying muscle to get it passed.
And once both forces align, the regulation becomes almost impossible to stop.
That's the broader point. Our paper doesn't argue that short-term rental regulation is inherently wrong. It argues that when you look at who organized for this ban, who funded it, and who reaped the financial rewards, the pattern is consistent with regulatory capture.
Which raises a question for the 40-plus cities that have reportedly reached out to replicate New York's approach.
Exactly. If a regulation displaces thousands of individual hosts and raises costs for travelers, we should be confident it's delivering genuine public benefits, not mainly transferring revenue to the incumbent industry that lobbied for it.
So this research pushes us to look more carefully at who shapes regulation and who profits from it, especially when a plausible public interest story makes the policy hard to question.
And that's the tension. Regulation can address a real problem and serve industry interests at the same time. The challenge is figuring out which motive is doing the heavy lifting, because that determines whether the policy actually serves the people it claims to.
The natural next question is whether other cities considering similar Airbnb restrictions are going to see the same dynamics. Barcelona, Paris, San Francisco, they've all done versions of this. The research is starting to come in.
So you're saying the New York City case is the first clean look, but probably not the only one we'll be talking about.
We'll break down the comparative work when it drops. Subscribe and we'll make sure you see it.